Today, I'm excited to welcome Dylan to the podcast. Dylan advocates for worldwide Bitcoin adoption and is working on building a better future for Africa. Dylan recently sent a Bitcoin proposal to the Zimbabwe government, which we will discuss. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Dylan.
Hey, Paula, thanks for having me. It's great to be on a Bitcoin show. I've recently really been putting maximum effort into Bitcoin only, and so it's great to be here.
Well, wonderful. You grew up in Bulawayo like myself, and you were also born here, right? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Zimbabwean born and bred. So I was born in Harare, but I grew up in Bulawayo. So I went to school for my whole school life at Petra High School. So from grade one all the way up to upper six, where I did my A levels. So that was my real home, if you like, schooling. Everything happened in Bulawayo and at Petra. And so I also was in school during the 2008 financial crisis. So I remember going to a rugby tournament because rugby is massive for international listeners. Rugby is massive in Southern Africa. And I remember going to play a rugby tournament, and we were going to the tuck shop, and we were going to buy your boerewors rolls and your hamburgers, and all of us were carrying around $1 billion, $1 trillion notes to go buy our food while we were playing school rugby. Which is sad when you think about it now as an adult, right? But we didn't know what was going on. It was just a piece of paper. We wanted the food at the end of the day, right? But yes, I grew up mainly in Bulawayo. I did have 2 years, actually. I went to school in Polokwane at a school called PEPS in South Africa. It used to be called Petersburg, I believe, Polokwane. And that was also really good. It exposed me to the South African economy, the South African culture. And then when I finished my A levels at Petra, I wrote business, economics, and maths. I then came over to the UK, where I've been for the last 10 years. So I like to describe it. I've seen three types of economies. Zim, which I would classify as maybe what people would say as a third world economy. South Africa, which I would say is in between third world and first world, I would say, in my opinion. And then obviously the UK, which would be considered a first world country, but that might not actually be the reality on the ground. And maybe we could discuss that too.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to hear about. As you know, I'm in Zimbabwe right now, and I too saw that inflation in 2008, where there were almost nothing on the shelves. People had suitcases of money, and it was quite incredible to witness. And then, fast forward to today, Zimbabwe is still one of the most expensive places to live. I was here 6 months ago, and in 6 months, goods have gone up at least 30 to 50%, some of them. And I don't know how people survive. So tell us a little bit more about the hyperinflation and what you're witnessing.
Well, inflation in general is a worldwide issue. All right, so no nation has managed to survive inflation. Zimbabwe went through hyperinflation, where there was a mass increase in prices, right? Where one day bread could have cost 1 million, which is, in the first instance, is insanity, right? Bread costing 1 million. What are we talking about, right? And then the next day it could be 10 million. All right. And the consistent issue across the world is this increase in pricing, increase in prices, increase in prices. Even when I came to the UK 10 years ago and I was working, my career as a salesperson. So, it's my bread and butter. I would encourage any Zimbabwean that has an internet connection, you want to make a little extra money, learn to be a revenue generator. So sales, marketing, any of these key core skills, you could offer these skills to the international community. Zimbabweans are known for being very good at linguistics. You can speak very well, especially over the phone, right? But if you go out and you want to make some extra cash, do sales. And so I've been doing sales, and over the 10 years, I've noticed how my money has just been decreasing, how much I can spend, in other words. Rent has increased, the price of food has increased. My real life has gone down if I had stayed earning the same wage in the UK, right? And so this is confusing for me because as a Zimbabwean, all my life, I was told that if you come to a Western world or a Western country, that's the solution. There is no other solution after that. You go to a place where things are run correctly, right? And that's the savior to all your problems. Now, there are some things that obviously the UK gets right. Like there's less corruption. There is corruption, but there's less of it. There's a stronger rule of law, although it's skewing it. It has its own problems. But one thing that is consistent in Zimbabwe and in the UK, and I'm sure in America, in Venezuela, one thing that we have in common as world citizens is that our real wages are being depleted while the prices of everything is going up. It doesn't matter which country you're in. The only thing that will differ between countries is the rate of your poorness. How quickly you are getting poorer, how quick that happens will depend on which country you're in. And so I noticed that, and that was a very big issue, which led me into the hands of crypto. And first crypto, I was first a shitcoiner. I will say that. And then this year, I really focused on Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, spreading the Bitcoin message, especially in Africa. And thus led me to writing a proposal to the Zim Treasury as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your Bitcoin journey. So I know you said you started working in ETH, but tell us about your Bitcoin journey.
Yes, well, Bitcoin, I've always held Bitcoin. So now that I've experienced both worlds, there's a convergence. What you generally find is that people operating in crypto or like ETH or Solana or these other projects, they will be more open to holding Bitcoin. So they might hold Bitcoin too in their portfolios and have exposure to Bitcoin because they're already participating in the blockchain ecosystems, even if it's a separate blockchain, right? So I still held Bitcoin, even though I was working full time in the ETH ecosystem. And I would use ETH to swap in between positions of ETH, Bitcoin, stablecoin, depending on the cycle. I was never against Bitcoin, but I do see now that I'm focusing on Bitcoin only, that there is and I'm going to have to make a decision soon on this, but there is from a Bitcoin maxi or a Bitcoin only perspective that everything else, they are not willing, or Bitcoiners are not willing to hold other tokens. Whereas ETH or Sol guys, they might be willing to hold Bitcoin. So my journey with Bitcoin has been fluid in the sense that I've held it from the moment I got into the blockchain space. But I was more focused on smart contracts, what you could do with programmable blockchains. And it's only really this year when I started really focusing in on, because I'm getting older, I'm 10 years in the job markets. Now I'm getting to the age where I'm thinking of kids, a future, it's no more about partying and lifestyle and things like this. And when when you're at my age and you start looking at the economic landscape, it starts getting a bit depressing. And so for me, I saw the Bitcoin message to be more valuable, a message to push than that of Ethereum and smart contracts and programmable technology. And so I switched over to really focusing on Bitcoin. And I also convinced myself through my, through my own research and really believing that this message is more important, especially for Africa. I also saw an allocation of my portfolio. So now I mainly hold Bitcoin over the other assets. So that has been my journey. I started off as a shitcoiner, as Bitcoin maxis call it, right? But from their perspective in the Ethereum ecosystem, they genuinely think they're building valuable products for the world. Okay, naturally there is both sides where there's scammers, there's fraudsters, in all ecosystems. It exists: banking ecosystems, Ethereum ecosystem, unfortunately, even the Bitcoin ecosystem, which Jamie Dimon always likes to remind us about. But yes, that's been my journey. And now I'm fully focused, honed in on Bitcoin only, specifically in Africa. I really want to see adoption over there. I think, we should have been on it earlier. And I'm surprised there's even work for me to do, but it seems like there is. And so I want to do it, and I want to push the Bitcoin message in Zimbabwe first, and then perhaps in other countries too.
Yeah, that's a very interesting journey. And I think you make a really good point about many people starting because they realize there's a problem. You laid out the problem, inflation's part of the problem. And then people go in to try to make more money to keep up with inflation. So it's natural that they would start off in some of the altcoins. And I'd just like to hear, what was it and who really influenced you into focusing more on Bitcoin?
So it was actually one of my South African friends. We started a daily Twitter space. We just wanted to come and have conversations, and he had very high conviction in Bitcoin, and we would debate back and forth. And obviously, me being a Zimbabwean, him being a South African, but we were extracted from the economies, and we were just debating solutions. And he kind of opened my eyes towards the importance of the message. I think when I was in the UK, I had seen, there's a lot of competition in the UK economy, and I suppose the US economy. Everyone can start businesses and so forth on the internet. I mean, all right. And so the Ethereum and altcoin messages can, I think, really resonate with some people because they're chronically online, right? Whereas for Africa, Bitcoin is really important. Like we're saying, a nation that's gone through hyperinflation like Zimbabwe, the rand, although much more stable than Zim ever was, same problem. It's a fiat currency. It's going to zero. Same like the pound, same like the US dollar. All right. At the end of the day, all of them, they have the same features. And so, as an African, I would be doing myself a disservice. I would just be doing a disservice. Like I say, I'm getting older. I'm starting to think about, I've come to the UK. Why could I not have started or built a life in Zimbabwe, my home country? I'm here struggling economically in the UK, but I'm starting businesses. I am bringing in revenue from outside of the UK myself, from my economic activities, and these are benefiting the UK. This could easily benefit Zimbabwe as well, right? And so, what will it take for me to go back to Zimbabwe? Well, we need a better economic a situation. We need to be operating on hard money system like Bitcoin. And so it's in our best interest, mine and anyone in the diaspora, of which there are millions. There are millions of people in the diaspora that have left the country because they just felt like there wasn't enough opportunity back home. So if we can reset to a hard money standard like Bitcoin, then that could open the door for us to go and start businesses, to have stable money systems for us to really bring economic input into the country and be confident that tomorrow you're not going to lose half your business to the ZIG, or the government's not going to take away your assets because of some politics that they have or some new governance systems that they have. This is why we need Bitcoin in Africa, and I think it's important for us to play our part. Yeah, so that's why it was a South African. So shout out to his name was Masejo, and he also introduced me to Hotato, I think his name is, who's also doing big stuff in South Africa with mobile payments for Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's some incredible things going on in South Africa, and we need the same for Zimbabwe. So tell us about your proposal. I think it's amazing what you are doing. So you sent a proposal to the Zimbabwe Ministry of Finance, and you mentioned a lot of ways how it would benefit Zimbabwe, like the remittance payments, and you mentioned 60% of Zimbabweans are unbanked, which is huge, and increased tourism. Tell us a little bit about this proposal.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the main goal of the proposal was mainly to get regulatory clarity on Bitcoin in Zimbabwe. And that's important for any country. I mean, we saw it in the US, right? When they recognized Bitcoin as a commodity, when the ETF started trading, it provided this air of legitimacy for Bitcoin businesses in the United States, and people were happy to build in there. The same with El Salvador. El Salvador was able to garner a ton of foreign investment to the point where they're even building a Bitcoin city, right? Where they're able to have this marketing machine. Bitcoiners promote El Salvador and Nayib Bukele more than his government departments do, tenfold, right? And so the main purpose of this proposal was really to try and to push the Zim Treasury, the Zim officials, to really just recognize Bitcoin at least as a commodity or as digital property. That's the main goal. That innovators, citizens can come and benefit from the effects of Bitcoin, which will then have a knock-on effect for the economy. All right. If people are earning and being able to save in hard assets, there's potential more tax revenue, more businesses are coming to start in the economy. That's more jobs, that's more people earning wages, that's more people that can be taxed. So as an economy who is currently 150th on the world, We have nothing to lose, in terms of trying to climb the ranks to be a top 100 country, a top 50 country, right? There's no reason why Zimbabwe should be 150th in the world when it used to be one of the greatest nations, or at least people used to perceive it as a great nation in Africa. And so a good start is the Bitcoin recognition as an asset. So why would the government do that? Well, we need a proposal. We need to make it beneficial for them. We can't just say, please, 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 because they might not listen to that. I wrote a proposal. It was split into three parts. The first part's just what is Bitcoin and why it's a valuable asset. And the second part is the use cases, which is the document or the screenshot I shared on X. And then the third part was a strategy for implementation. So the first one, what is Bitcoin? Well, as a Bitcoin native channel, I'm sure your audience already knows what Bitcoin is. It's why we're here, right? For the second part, for the reasons for, I've already named one, a foreign investment. If Zimbabwe aligns itself with the Bitcoin mission, okay, it would encourage Bitcoiners to try and use Zimbabwe as a case study for what is possible on a Bitcoin standard. You can come and build businesses there. We can come try and fix the economy on a Bitcoin standard. But they would need to align with Bitcoiners, and then we could come and do that, right? We'd be more than willing to come and do that, just like they were in El Salvador or any Bitcoin friendly nation. Right, that's number one. Number two, like you mentioned, unbanked. People are using the bank of the mattress. They're storing US dollars in their mattress. Okay, this is not safe. This is not optimal. You cannot plug into a global digital system and do business when your money is in your mattress. Okay, it can't work like that. All right, so we have the technology. Elon has provided Starlink. If we want to compete on internet, that's a different topic. But Starlink is there. People can access data theoretically. Now we need a hard money system, and that is Bitcoin, because the currency has failed many times. All right, so what happens when the citizens are more economically empowered? As a government institution, you have less complaints, less people complaining that you're a failure. They might even support you via more tax revenue, right? If people are able to participate on a worldwide economy and then save in a hard asset, and they have more money to pay taxes, and they have more money to spend in shops who also have VAT and so forth, and more businesses, and the economy will grow. Like Dubai. We keep talking about Dubai that came from nothing. We need a plan, and this is one plan that can help us tackle the trust question that Zimbabwe has. They keep launching the ZIG, the Zimbabwe dollar, the bearer check, all these. No one trusts it. Guys, let's stop. Okay, let's align ourselves with the Bitcoin mission. Let's tap into that trust that already comes with Bitcoin, and let's grow Zimbabwe this way. It doesn't have to be a singular strategy, but if they're aligned with Bitcoin, it could be a very beneficial for the economies via remittances, which have been dropping, but it's a billion dollar ecosystem via people that are unbacked. Let's plug them into the worldwide economy. And then foreign direct investment. All right, this is the biggest thing. Zimbabwe complains about sanctions. All right, you cannot be sanctioned on the Bitcoin network. That's just how it is. Okay, no one can stop you from operating on the Bitcoin network. And so if they're really serious about improving their financial position, their economic position as a nation state, I think they should be seriously considering Bitcoin, and that leads to implementation. So some of the things I included were, for example, legally clarifying that Bitcoin is a digital property or a commodity. So we need clarification there, so that merchants are not worrying if they can accept Bitcoin. If you're not worrying, we need clarification, right? We don't want 100 people going to prison because they're accepting Bitcoin, all right, one day. So we need clarification there. Number two, the government should DCA, similar to El Salvador. All right, we should be buying Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. We're already doing it with gold. That was the idea behind the ZIG, buy gold in assets. Well, Bitcoin is the new gold. Let's DCA, buy Bitcoin every day. This has worked very well for El Salvador, who's the only like lone wolf really taking this seriously, and it's working really, really well for him. So let's DCA every day. Let's set an amount, a yearly amount, 1 to 5%, and let's buy Bitcoin with our budget. Already, let's stop wasting it on inefficient government operations. Let's spend 1 to 5% on Bitcoin. So recognize Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin. Those are the two implementation. I am watering it down, but that's the basics of the proposal.
Well, I think your proposal's amazing and your sentiments behind it are just wonderful. And it's a first step. Have you heard back from them?
No, no.
Right. Well,
I
it's a
have.
first. And I didn't expect you to say yes. Just what I wanted to get at here is in order for the government to implement this, there would have to be a very forward thinking person there. And I know there are. There are. However, have you been to Zimbabwe lately?
I haven't been. I haven't been defined lately. How many years?
Well, well, so I'm here now. The roads are so bad. Even the main roads into the main town are so full of potholes. It's hard to drive. They are falling apart. And so the country is struggling. Funds are being mismanaged. So I absolutely agree that your proposal has merit and that there are people there who would see that. But it's just like in any country, the system benefits the people at the top, right? That is why we love Bitcoin. The system benefits the people at the top. So in the meantime, Zimbabweans can get into Bitcoin. However, there's no on ramp. There's no easy on ramp. It's peer to peer. They can't go to a Kraken or a Coinbase. So they have that, but they are doing it. There are people who are selling Bitcoin peer to peer. So those are just some of the challenges.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. There's that friction, right? There's that
Yeah.
friction because if there's that legal status, which is why I decided to go this route instead of maybe trying grassroots adoption in Zim, which will be the next step. But education was also part of the proposal because that's going to be a big part, educating people on how to use the technology and why it's important, for example. But from a government's perspective, and the same thing could have been said about the United States. You know, what reason would Donald Trump and his party have for you know to come in? They run the biggest printer in the world. Biden, I think, printed 2 trillion in the last administration. That's more than the Zimbabwean officials could ever imagine. You know, they could never print 2 trillion. But somehow, somewhere, America is starting to smell, they're smelling the coffee and realizing that this is not sustainable. So really, this is, again, I mean, in Bitcoin, we talk about game theory. I don't know if they have a politics game theory or not. But surely if you're a politician and you're looking at different asset classes across the world, and you're seeing America, you're seeing El Salvador, you're seeing Argentina, you're seeing all these nations starting to redirect away from this big government inflationary system that we have. It should start making you think, all right? I suppose you're right. That is going to be the biggest issue as to trying to align the incentives with the current government. I think we should be a part of the conversation nonetheless. Because as Donald Trump takes office, if he does what he says he's going to do around Bitcoin, there's going to be increasing pressure internationally to also play the game too. And so I think as Bitcoiners, we should involve ourselves in the conversation so that what happens to Europe doesn't happen to Zim. In Europe, it's mass regulation, it's known as a nanny state. In the UK, for example, you can't buy Bitcoin without snitching on your friend. I call it a snitch program. There's this rule called the travel rule. Let's say you send me Bitcoin, I have to tell the provider your name, your country, what wallet type you used. Right? What? That I don't know. I get that there needs to be some kind of safeguards in place for various reasons, but this is insanity. And so we need to be, as Bitcoiners, involved in the conversation when the government officials are having these conversations so that we can tell them, listen, this is what is important, this is what will work, this is what won't work. Okay, so that if they do adopt it, and when they do, should we say, that it's done correctly. It's just a matter of time rather than anything else. So that's the theory. And if we can get it done sooner rather than later, I mean, we've got 3 days before Donald Trump comes in, so maybe we can get the Ministry of Finance to make a quick decision. I doubt it.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you're working on this because we have heard by many experts that the nations that adopt Bitcoin quicker will lead the way. Obviously, Donald Trump is going to hopefully adopt a strategic reserve for Bitcoin. As we all know, though, it is a debt-based system. So long term, the fiat system, it's insolvent, as Jeff Booth says. The fiat system is going to most likely implode at some point, but that could be many, many years down the road. And in the meantime, anybody and any nation who adopts Bitcoin is going to be ahead of the curve. And that's what we're trying to do, right?
That's the goal. I mean, there is this side of it whereby we don't want, because I consider myself a libertarian as well, pro freedoms. But and if that's the case, you don't want government involved at all. You know, government shouldn't be involved in our business in the first place, right? But I like what Malay said when he was trying to fix Argentina. He says, look, there's the reality and then there's the ideal. Okay. And in order for us to get to the ideal situation, we have to first go through reality. And the reality is right now, we need the governments to provide this legal. I mean, okay, look, let me rephrase. We don't need it. It would save a lot of people a lot of hardship if they accepted Bitcoin sooner. We know what it was like during 2008. I don't know, like direct situations, but my grandparents lost their pensions, lost their savings, and then decided to move to the UK. So I lost my grandparents essentially. I stayed in Zimbabwe. Everything was fine. I was going to visit my grandparents. I love to go visit my grandparents. And then one day they were gone. Why? Because of the money system, right? And they lost everything, which is very sad. And it's unacceptable. So the sooner people get in, yes, we don't need governments, but the reality is now, as of today, governments exist. And if they accept Bitcoin as legal, as a commodity, or as digital property, as those kind of classifications, then it would encourage more people to get off the debt-based fiat system that they're on right now, which I think it's a worthy goal for us to pursue. And then as Bitcoin becomes harder money, the debt system is going to go away. And then hopefully we're going to have politicians that are true to their word, because they cannot print money out of thin air. They're going to have to go to citizens to raise money for their ideas, right? And in that process, hopefully we also sort out the issues with government too.
Yeah. Governments are just people too. And I'm sure there are some people who want the citizens to be profitable too. And in time, like you said, if you make Zimbabwe a more attractive place to do business, it's going to be better for everybody. And every country is like that. Like you mentioned, the UK, Europe is too regulated right now. Yeah, people, we're all looking for more freedom. On your X, you wrote fix the incentives, fix the world. That's a more broad statement than fix the money, fix the world, right?
Yes.
Explain what you meant by that.
Well, I'm a career salesperson, right? So for 10 years, I've done sales. And if you work in the sales industry, and let me put it into perspective, I work specifically now with startups. I'm a first salesperson hire. So I'm usually the first person that for the last 3 startups I've worked with, I was the first salesperson that they've hired. All right. Now, usually what happens in all sales scenarios is that incentives or commission structures or how you get rewarded is an important factor in how you actually go about doing your work. And it's very clear in sales and in business. So a CEO and an entrepreneur, um, predominantly their job function is a sales job function. They have to recruit and they have to raise money. Those are sales jobs. Okay. And so as a salesperson, you do better, we found, generally speaking, if the incentives are aligned. And it's not as easy as saying, hey, the more money you make, the more sales you're going to make. No, it needs to be an in between. There's a line with the incentives. Too much incentives, and everything comes crashing down. For example, if someone can make a year's wage with one sale, they might be incentivized to only make one sale a year. And the same can be said is if you make too little, you might not be incentivized to do anything at all. Okay. And so this happens in our current world. The governments don't have the right incentives. It's run by bureaucrats, really. So if you go into like the deep state and parliamentary people that can't be voted out, and we have lobbyists who we don't even know, with big deep money created from this debt environment. In other words, they can print, they've got access to the printer, good credit scores, assets that they bought years ago, whatever, you know, and now they are just dunking on you over and over and over again because the incentives are aligned that way. It's in their best interest to print money to buy hard assets and to buy houses and to buy up farmlands, and to, the incentives are aligned for them to do that. And on the flip side, if you're a citizen at the bottom, it's so hard to build anything because you don't have the same access to capital, that you just don't do it at all. And so we find a bunch of young people just not doing anything. They're just not motivated to start businesses. They just don't have the incentive because their savings are washed away, or whatever the case may be. So, money is a great place to start, because, you don't want to earn your incentives and then it all disappears the next day. All right. And then from there, you want to build the right incentive. So things like I'm saying, if a government wants to do something, they should go to their citizens to raise money based on the strength of the idea versus being able to print. And that itself needs to have systems in itself. So there's a saying, I think, that fiat doesn't cause all our problems, but it magnifies all our problems. So it makes them 1,000 times worse. So, you'll still have corruption, you'll still have criminality, but it'll be at such a reduced rate if you were just to fix the debt-based system and have Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Some money has changed the way I think about things. For example, low time preference. I'm less likely to spend frivolously when I have a money like Bitcoin that's over the long run going up in value. Whereas, like you mentioned, all of our other currencies are going down in value, so we're incentivized to spend. I also wanted to ask, is it difficult to buy a home as a young person in the UK?
Uh, yeah, yes. It depends on difficulty. I mean, most people don't. There's a declining number of young people that own homes. So I'm 28. Most of my peers don't own homes. Okay, and that wouldn't be the case 50 years ago, I don't think. You coming up to 30 years of age, by that time you at least have a property under your belt. Maybe you're starting to pay your mortgage or something like this, right? So for the most part, no, they don't. People can, if they had the right setup and environment. So, for example, let's say you were able to stay with your parents up until you were 30, and they were able to support you, and you were able to find a good job early on. Maybe you were able to get student finance. And so if you had the right setup, it's still possible in that sense. But for the vast majority of people in today's world, it's hard. It's super hard to get on the property ladder. And I think the stats show that, in the UK, this is the first generation that's going to do worse than their parents. And, that's a trend that is going on around the world. And this is the result of just the fiat system lasting too long. It's been going on for 100 years, and this is the outcome. And the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. So my kids, should I have them, would theoretically do worse than me and my grandparents. And that's not and it makes sense now why, now that I'm saying this out loud, why the birth rates are declining in the West. Because it's I suppose for young females especially, why would you want to bring a child into a world where they're going to do worse off than you did? Usually you would bring someone into the world because you have hope for the future, hope for humanity, hope for the world. But yeah, the system has poisoned so many levels of society that it's really it should be a no-brainer for anyone that understands Bitcoin, that we should be going hard at advocating for this across Africa, especially.
Absolutely. But we do have Bitcoin now, and
Yes.
you can change your future for your family. And one person at a time, we can change it for many people as long as they're open to it. Why do you think more people don't see it? Do your friends see it? Do your colleagues see it?
Some of them do, and they're starting to see it the more I speak on it. Most people don't need education, they need reminding, right? And so that's basically it. I mean, look, when you look at Bitcoin, there is no difference on the front end to a banking app. Okay, in other words, I log into my banking app. I can send money to my friend. They get it. They log into their banking app. So it's similar to opening up my wallet, processing the transaction, my friend receiving it on their end, and the balance is increasing. So from the front end's perspective, there's no big material difference between the function of actually transacting. All right. And so I think people are slow to the uptake because really to get Bitcoin's value, you then now have to start digging into economics and technology. These are not topics of interest for the vast majority of people. Um, People have all sorts of interests. They like sports, music, um, history. There's so many topics that people love in life. Technology and economics might not be one of them. And so this is the challenge that I think we have, is that on the front end it seems no different to Jamie Dimon's banking app. And so to really understand the value, you need to understand some kind of economics or technology. That's going to be a challenge. It's an education issue. And from there, it's just reminding people over and over and over again, because they might know it and then they just can't be asked. They don't really get the economic value yet. And so, if you just keep drumming it home, keep putting the message out there, like I say, reminding people, that's what's important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't give up. I have interviewed some amazing people on this channel from Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe. They all have grassroots and business endeavors in their countries. And in Kenya, they have some amazing technology that you can pay somebody in Bitcoin, and the app converts it into the local currency. And I think as technology gets better, then more and more people will see it. Like you mentioned, on the front end it's the same, and it's less fees, more decentralized. You don't have to pay all the middlemen. It's the technology. And well, in Bitcoin's case, it is the future, right? It is the protocol of the future. Let's get to a little bit the difference of altcoins and Bitcoin. So me being, I base my channel a lot on what I learned from Jeff Booth. Jeff Booth says that Bitcoin is a protocol, like the internet, like the very base layer of the internet. And we are building on this new protocol, and that this protocol and the fiat system are incompatible. So that means one day, even though that technology is incredible that they're building on a lot of the altcoins, they do have some incredible technology. They're building it on the wrong protocol. What do you think about that?
Well, listen, as a libertarian, pro freedom, let them do what let everyone do what they want to do, and the market will decide in that sense. I think Bitcoin makes the most sense to me because it's singular focused, and we look into a complete one mission, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, was part of the reason why I switched over. But I know there is a sector of Bitcoin where they are trying to do what Ethereum and Solana and so forth are trying to do. So, for example, they have inscriptions and ordinals. The technology might be a little bit different, but then you also have, I think is it rootstock, or there's side chains and layer twos that are trying to make Bitcoin programmable. So, if those projects are successful, then it wouldn't take too much just to, because most of crypto is open source, and what you might find is that often, like for example, a lot of the marketplaces and a lot of the technologies on Ethereum eventually started opening up to other chains as well, like opening up their services to Solana and other chains. So it shouldn't be too difficult to port over to Bitcoin, is what I'm trying to say. But what they're trying to achieve on Ethereum side is they're trying to decentralize everything, whereas Bitcoin is trying to decentralize money, or we want hard money. So the Bitcoin thesis is you don't need to decentralize everything if you have a hard money. So you kind of see it as pointless as decentralizing everything else, whereas the Ethereum thesis is like, hey, centralization as a whole is dangerous. So for example, governments and central banks are the main proponents of power that Bitcoin are trying to take from on that side. Whereas Ethereum, they might see things like Facebook or Google or Twitter or things like of this nature, products built on the internet that have centralized features. These too should be decentralized. And you could do that through having programmable blockchains. So that is the main difference. Bitcoin is decentralization of money and of a hard digital gold, if you like, whereas the Ethereum, Solana, that community, all the other blockchains, smart contract blockchains, essentially have said, okay, yeah, let's do that, but on steroids, essentially, and try and decentralize everything and anything we can. Listen, some of those things have merit, I think. Some of them don't. And if they should come over to Bitcoin, if Bitcoin is the dominant chain in the future, which I think it's going to be, then we, like I say, we could just, if there's a valuable product like stable coins on Ethereum or Solana, which I think has been the biggest use case on those chains, like stable coins has been quite valuable. If there's a need be, maybe we could port that over to Bitcoin. I don't see how that can happen though, right? If Bitcoin is the dominant chain, but it's just an example. I also do think that competition is somewhat important. So, for example, Bitcoin is the main chain. Solana and Ethereum could be quote unquote test nets or competition to Bitcoin so that it doesn't become a complacent system within itself. So we had a central bank monopoly. They became complacent because of that monopolistic tendency over the market. And so they didn't innovate. If anything, these could be test nets and provide a competitive edge to Bitcoin, which they do. Bitcoin has spent a lot of time talking about why Ethereum is bad, why Bitcoin is good, and it's creating content. It creates conversation. And that in itself helps people understand economics or token structure or things like this, what makes good, what makes bad, for example, right? And if anything, that is a good function, I think, of them.
Yeah, I think for now there are some very good uses for them. I know that on the Solana network that a lot of trading is done on it, on all the decentralized exchanges, and there is a huge use case right now. The one main difference that I would bring up is that there is no leader in Bitcoin, and that is huge because no matter what great guy Vitalik is, there is a leader, and Anatoly, there's a leader, and they are great guys. They seem very smart, but that one key difference is one big advantage that Bitcoin has: no leader, because those guys might be great while they're there, but what happens when they're gone? We don't know who's going to replace them.
True,
Well,
true.
yeah.
I do think so as well. There's pros and cons for everything. For example, right now, I don't know if you saw the news 2 days ago. I think it might have been, but Donald Trump was also talking about now putting XRP and maybe Solana as a reserve asset. And the reasoning being is that their quote unquote leaders went and they were, lobbying and so forth to get it done, which from what I'm saying is the problem we have in Zimbabwe. Like no one is doing that in Zimbabwe for Bitcoin from my research, right? Not at the level in the United States anyway. So that's the only one disadvantage. I mean, look, I'm a massive Bitcoin now this year, Bitcoin only proponent. But I think this is where we get to see. Like, so for example, we can draw that alignment now because hey, there's a blockchain with leaders, here's a blockchain without a leader, and now you can have that conversation. Whereas if that didn't exist, it would just be a theoretical. Now, how it plays out, I think obviously Bitcoin is going to win. I don't think these other chains are going to go down without a fight. I think fiat is likely to go to zero before the other chains are. I think that would be a good, like fiat, like dollar. It's likely to outlast the other chains, mainly like Ethereum, maybe Solana, XRP. They might outlast fiat. But from there, I think Bitcoin outlasts the rest of them. So it depends what game you want to play, really. You safer and simpler just buying Bitcoin. But there's speculators, there's traders, everyone has a different drink that they like to sip on. And, in a free market world, who am I to stop them, right?
Absolutely. Free market. And in the next couple of years, they're likely to do pretty well. So, on that note, how has Bitcoin changed you?
Bitcoin has given me hope, I think. That is one massive difference. As a young adult, I don't know if I could be called young anymore. I was watching some TikTok videos where they're asking.
Wait, you're 28 years old. You're pretty young.
Yeah, but it depends who you ask, right? I was listening to some TikToks, and they were going around like doing interviews with people that go to clubs. They're going clubbing, nights out, and they were asking them, "Hey, who do you think? What age would someone have to be born in for them to be considered old?" And the common consensus is if you're born below 2000. So if you have a birth age starting with 19, you're old. And so apparently I fall into that category now. But no, listen, I see a lack of hope amongst people my age. There's a lot of it. There's still a lot of good. I'm an eternal optimist as well. So I still see people having kids, getting married, and all this kind of stuff, buying houses, but it's at such a low rate that it's embarrassing. So many people don't want to have kids, or if they do, they don't want to have as many as they would have in the past. People are thinking differently just about their lives. There's so little hope that you can buy a house, that you can be successful in business, that your savings mean anything, that people just fall into a life of degeneracy, just skirting through life, basically. I go to work, make my money, pay my bills. I live for 12 days a year, that being payday. And the next day it's all gone. And then I'm back on the rat race. That's not a life, right? And so hope is an interesting feeling, because now all of a sudden, perhaps I could put really hard work into building for 10 years, save enough Bitcoin, and then I could really go around and really start enjoying my life. But all of a sudden now, I have a real motivation and hope to put in hard work for 10 years because I want to earn that Bitcoin, which is going to be valuable later on. Whereas with the fiat world, there's no hope. You can't save the money. If you do save the money, it becomes worthless. And on top of that, the asset prices are going up. Like you're trying to save for a house, it's going up every year. You can't save fast enough, and it's hopeless. And yeah, I think it affects a lot of people's lives more than they think. A lot of the times they think they might have relationships problems, or they have a depression problem, or they have this kind of problem, but really it's a economic problem.
So, do you think you'll move back to Zimbabwe in 10 years if the country's changed?
Oh yes, absolutely, I would. If I've said this to ministers and so forth, like, listen, if you even if they put Bitcoin as legal digital property or as a commodity, then I would consider going back and building businesses over there. Okay, because I don't have to worry about counterparty risk with the ZiG or the US dollar. I can start a business and earn in Bitcoin, and it can be a business that's scalable, right? Because I can operate on an international network. People across borders can be paid in Bitcoin too, and so it solves a lot of problems of building in Zimbabwe. Um, if someone's serious about seeing a better Zimbabwe, or it's going to start with us that are willing. I really like what Mark Zuckerberg says, and I like Zuck's transformation that he's going through. I see he named his goat Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
But he was saying like he doesn't know how to get a million users or a billion users of anything. He didn't know how to start this business or start this thing, and so or we don't need to know exactly how we're going to move the country forward. But if they put us on a hard money standard, and it's a free market, I would go back and figure it out. Use my energy, my 10 years of skills that I've built up in the UK to add value to the Zim economy. Just as long as I knew I wasn't going to get fleeced the very next day with policies that are nonsense, So yes, I would. And I think a lot of people would too. Not even Zimbabweans. Like people moved to El Salvador that weren't El Salvadorians to go and build businesses there and to be a part of this movement and this new building. We're natural adventurers and explorers. They've dumbed down our population. That's what this fiat system has done to us, all right? So we are natural builders, explorers. If people think there's an opportunity, they'll go back and build. And I think it's important to send that message out through your policies, through the marketing that the governments are doing back home.
Yeah, I think you make some great points. I want to give a shout out to Zimbabwe because it is a wonderful country. The people are wonderful. It's peaceful here. It's beautiful. Yes, with the global economy and with the help of AI. And, just talking to you, you do sound like a global citizen. You talk about every part of the world because that's how the world is today. It is global. We can be in contact with everybody. And just knowing Bitcoiners tend to educate ourselves more and more because we realize that actually we've been lied to about the current system. The current system is actually stealing from us, and it's time that we wake up. So I have so much hope from what you are saying. Keep going with Zimbabwe and keep on them, because this is the way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I would say anyone listening, I just, lobbying, people hear lobbying and you kind of think of this abstract kind of thing. Because lobbying is the way that you try and influence policy in the world, right? Or in your government or any institution. And that's all it is. So you can even do this on social media, right? So right now I have notifications on for Zim Treasury, for finance ministers, and for various different players. And if the post is right, I'm going to be under there talking about Bitcoin. We post about Bitcoin. We want to come up with ideas about Bitcoin. And the moment that it's accepted as, or it's got a legal status in Zimbabwe, then we move back and we try and build something great over there. So if the government is willing to support us Bitcoiners, then we should show that we're willing to go back and do some great. I know, and like you say, there's already a bunch of people in Zim already trying to do things like Bitcoin Reach, and I even spoke to this one founder that is using the heat from a Bitcoin miner to heat a fishing reservoir, which was very interesting, right? And these kind of solutions that Bitcoiners can come and build, because not only do they have a passion for Bitcoin, but they also have a passion of bringing Zimbabwe back up to the great standards that it used to be on. Yeah, I think it would be a really good move for Zim Treasury to make. And just one last point, Paul, if I could. I know most countries, they want to launch CBDCs. As someone that's built on ETH, they're all going to fail. Let me talk to governments directly right now. If you launch a CBDC, the US is going to destroy you. Okay. Think about it, right? If you have a protocol where all these CBDCs operate, because it's going to have to be one protocol that they operate on. Otherwise, how are they going to clear cross-border, right? So similar to like how on Bitcoin or on any other blockchain, if you have a MetaMask wallet or a Coinbase wallet, you can hold Bitcoin, Ethereum, stable coins, Solana, whatever. Why would you hold any other token? And we're already seeing this in the stable coin world. No one uses the digital euro. No one uses the digital pound or the digital this. Everyone wants USDC or USDT or something like this. It's got the most liquidity. There's 180 nation states. 98% of them are exploring CBDCs. 98% of them are going to fail because Pareto says there's only a few of you that are going to win. So government officials, listen, about 10 of you should be focusing on CBDCs. That's it. Right? Maybe the US, I'm not saying CBDCs are good, but I'm saying as a nation state strategy, maybe the US, maybe European Union, maybe China, that's it. If you're Zimbabwe, you have no business launching a CBDC. You're going to lose every time. You're better off going with a Bitcoin strategy. If you're Mozambique, even South Africa, $1 trillion, they'll lose. No one's going to be using the Rand over USD in their wallet. It's just, what are we talking about? Yeah? Even the government officials themselves, I bet, would prefer to use USDC than Rand T or whatever the digital version of that is. So the CBDC game, you're going to lose because most people are going to use the US dollar or the yen or maybe the euro. So the only way you're going to make a CBDC work is by putting mass regulations on your citizens to make sure that they only use your currency, because technologically they can use any one they want. Okay. And so you have to put mass regulations on your citizens for it to work. And it won't. Okay. So you're better off, especially if you're a smaller nation, going on a Bitcoin strategy, getting ahead of all these other nations. Rather than launching a CBDC, you're going to lose to the United States, to China, to Europe, maybe even, So maybe there will be a small country that, I don't know, everyone wants to use their stable coin, but, I don't see it, right? I don't see it. So you're better off adopting a Bitcoin strategy, at the very least as a hedge. At the very least as a hedge. Yeah.
I'd have to agree with that. Great point. I think that's a very good point. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Tell
Thank
us where
you.
people can find you.
I'm just a global citizen, so just on Twitter, just at CoinJuncture. That's where I post most of my Bitcoin only stuff. So yeah, I will be upping the ante. I've been really getting into trying to understand my thesis. I've been going through Michael Saylor's content on the Saylor app and also Saifedean's, all his books. And then I'm really going to attack this mission. I've been speaking with people on Bitcoin. Anyone building on Bitcoin in Zimbabwe, I'm happy to speak to any economists, any shows, anything. Uh, Together, I think all of us should really try and push this so that 2025 could be a turnaround year for Zimbabwe and any other nation states. This would apply there too. So yeah, let's get it done.
Absolutely. This is open to everybody. And we do hope Zimbabwe pays attention. Thanks so
Yes.
much for joining me.
Thank you, Paula. Cheers.